think makes a difference between a happy and sad retirement? Why do some people thrive in retirement and others seem to wither? Well, I'm David Day, and I want to help you have a happy, healthy, and fulfilling retirement. I have prepared 5 essential elements for a happy and fulfilling retirement. And I have a special bonus tip at the end, so watch for that, because you won't want to miss that. Number 1, we must be active in our retirement and not passive. So what do I mean by active? Well, I use the analogy of thinking about our lives being that of a rabbit or a roadrunner, something active like that, versus a couch potato, right? So things like how would we be active? Well, having an active lifestyle means that we are going to have a regular exercise and activity levels. So this will help with our weight control. It'll help lubricate our joints because movement is life, right? We want to do that. Another thing is we want to be engaged in life with others. So for instance, if you're going walking the dog, you want to walk the dog, but do it at a time when you'll be able to visit with some of your neighbors. You want to be in an exercise class. Well, you want to go with some friends, or you need to make friends at the class because that will help engage. It's not just the activity itself, but it's also the relationships that you forge. For instance, a lot of people in retirement play pickleball, and so that's something I want to learn how to do. But right now, Karen and I play tennis, but I'd like to do pickleball because it seems that a lot of retired folks do that, and we can do that a little farther along in life. Another thing is going to be going on hikes. But once again, don't just hike by yourself. Make sure you're doing it with somebody. And then you fill in the blanks. What are the things that you like to do that will help you stay active? But I would say the crucial element to this is not necessarily the activity. So don't just think about the activity. Think about the activity in the context with relationships. Passive, now we don't have to spend a lot of time because we can naturally do this. But a sedentary life, if you're kind of laying on the couch and not doing much, that's just an indication or symptom of withdrawal. And it's kind of sad, as I've been doing research on this, it appears that there's a significant number of people who die within the first year after retiring. And I'm going, well, that's weird. But one of the questions I've wondered is, are you dreaming about, I can't wait till I retire, till I can just lay on the couch and do nothing? Is that what's going on in your mind? And if it is, I think we need to reframe that. We need to envision and create a more vivid retirement. So this idea of a more vivid retirement, one of the things we want to do is we want to have a forward focus versus a rearward focus. So when I say forward, think about it, you're in your car and you want to look through your windshield, that's the forward focus, versus looking at your rear view mirror at places you have been. I don't even like the word retire, because we're going to retire, that kind of, we're going to go to bed. Or to retire means we're tired all over again. I don't like it. And so if we're forward focused, I think we need to reframe the word that we use. And so let's start thinking about a new adventure. And so I want you to think about the things that are now possible that once you've retired. So for instance, let's say, what trips would you like to go on? Have you wanted to go meet family members? Would you want to go plan a gathering of all the extended families? Those sorts of things. So let's start thinking about forward things that we can look forward to that are now an option. For me, in a month, I'm going to go fly to Minneapolis and help my daughter move down to Florida. And so I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to take a 3-week vacation. Not only am I going to drive one of her cars down to Florida, but I'm going to drive over to Oklahoma, see my brother, and to Tennessee, my mother-in-law, and some relatives there, and then get down to Florida because I have a week's time to get from the house in Minneapolis before they have possession of the house in Florida. And I'll see my brother-in-law down there as well. So it's really going to be a fun time for me. So this is just one example of the things that are now possible for me in retirement that get me excited. And it's something, now my wife's not so excited because I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks from her. But it's the sort of thing that I really am quite joyous about, actually. So that's kind of cool. So if you're backwards focused, what would that look like? Well, let's say as you're contemplating retirement or getting your retirement, if you're thinking about the clients that you're going to miss, or the customers, or maybe some of your coworkers that you're going to miss, if that is making you sad as you think about that, and you're finding yourself ruminating about that, that's an example of a backward focus. Or what am I going to do with my time? I used to go to work and do all these things. If you're looking and thinking about what you did then, that's a rearward focus perspective, right? So we want to be more forward focused. Another idea to ask you is what color is your retirement? I'll never forget, I was at a conference, I'm a chiropractor, and so one of the speakers was kind of a motivational type of a speaker, and they asked a question and it was in the context of change, and they said, if you think about change, what color do you see? And the point was, if when you think about changing, you're scared, oh no, and it's black and dark or something like that, that tells you that you need to reframe your image of change in that context. Well, I want to use that same analogy and think about retirement and say, what color is retirement in your mind? And if it's a foreboding or something, the uncertainty of the change and it's kind of scary and it's like, oh no, if that's how you feel about it, then what we want to do is reframe that and say, well, let's color it with the color that you would look forward to stepping into. So what's your favorite color? Maybe it's blue or green or pink or something like that. So then let's think about retirement and let's put it in those colors, in that context, and see if we can get us more forward focused as opposed to rearward focused. So stepping into retirement, in my opinion, should be attractive and something that we look forward to, not something we dread. Now, the third essential element to a happy retirement is that we need to have rich relationships. So that means we need to be intentional and nurture the relationship with our spouse and our friends. We've got to initiate the contact with them, call them, meet with them, do things with them. If you're involved in a church or perhaps in a hobby or affinity group, community involvement, we need to make sure that we have a number of places that need our expertise and benefit from our involvement. And so things like we can volunteer at a food pantry, for instance, help sort the food, get it ready for distribution. We could do there's something called SMART, which is Start Making a Reader Today, which is you go into the elementary schools and you read with children who come from underprivileged homes. It doesn't take any preparation. It just means you come with a heart and you let the kid read to you, or you can read to the child. It's just an amazing thing. Something I really love to do. But that's really important that we have. And so remember, we have to nurture these relationships in the context of involvement in our community. We need to make sure that when we meet to exercise or be involved in sports, that we think about the people who we're enjoying those sports with, right? That we want to make sure that we have coffee dates, that we're going out to lunch with people, and that we're going to happy hours. Hey, by the way, did you know that there's actually two different happy hours? There is the early happy hour, which is like from 3 to 6. There's a whole nother happy hour that my wife and I didn't even know existed, like from 9 to 11 or something like that our kids would go to as they were growing up. And who knew, right? But it's so funny because when I was younger looking at retired people, back then they called it the early bird special. So we're too cool for that though. So we go to happy hour, and but it's really the first happy hour, the 3 to 6, which I love. All right, the fourth essential element to a happy retirement is that you have to have an adventuresome curiosity versus the same old, same old. We need to be exploring new hobbies and new involvement, new opportunities. And as you know, I play bluegrass, and I'm in a band with my brothers, and we call it the Day Brothers. And I've got links to the CDs. We've recorded 5 different CDs with my brothers. So if you like bluegrass or kind of Americana folk, we write some of our own music, and it's just been a wonderful thing for me. In fact, I have a friend of mine who, when he retired, he was a photographer down in the LA area. He moved out to Portland, and so he was already retired when he was in a park where there was a bluegrass jam, and he heard the banjo, and he was just drawn to that, and he said, I have time, I want to learn how to play the banjo. So he started playing the banjo after having never played it before. So this is something that's kind of, as I'm thinking about curiosity and new things, have you always wanted to play a musical instrument? That's something that I have found great joy, because I've only been playing for about 10 years. I just started once our kids were grown. And now I build instruments and things like that. So be thinking and be curious about something like that. So what would it be for you? Are there some hobbies that you'd like to do, from photography to rock collection or anything like that? It's really something that I think we need to do. Now, Jerry and Linda, if you guys watch YouTube, I have found myself watching this lovely couple. They're in the Villages in Florida. And so they call themselves the Villages Newcomers or something like that. I'll put a link at the end of the video. They moved to Florida from Indiana, and so they tell their story about how they did that and the activities that they're now engaged in. Jerry obviously was really attracted to the golf, and so he was going to golf. Well, Linda didn't golf at all. Well, what do you know? Linda has made some friends who golf, and so now she has started golfing as well. And I think this is a great pattern for us. It's like What are some things that we can do? In fact, during this pandemic here, they went ahead and bought some bocce balls because they could go do that with some friends. And they also now just purchased 2 e-bikes, and so they're going to e-bike around. So this is a great model. As I'm thinking about what can we do as we're trying to pursue an active retirement and things like this. Be like Jerry and Linda, right? And in fact, their dog Gizmo, you've got to watch it because he just steals the show whenever he's there. He's just the cutest little thing. Well, they just interviewed a director of a movie called Some Kind of Heaven, and it's a documentary of some people who live in the villages. And I haven't even watched the movie, but I've watched Jerry and Linda's, because they're the Siskel and Ebert's assessment of that movie, and then I watched their interview with the director. And just, I'm loving this. And so it's really kind of a model in my mind as I'm thinking about how can we be more active and involved in life. They're doing things like this. I mean, just doing this YouTube channel that they're doing is brand new for them. It's another way, just like what I'm doing now. I'm doing this channel as well. So would you like me to do a video on the pros and cons of living in a retirement community like the Villages in Florida versus just having a standalone home in a suburban area? Let me know. The comments below. And while you're there, if you're liking this, then go ahead and click that the thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button as well. And I'd love to have you get notified. Then you've got to hit the bell because that will then make sure you get notified anytime I upload a new video. All right, the 5th element. We've got to make sure that we have a schedule versus just a wing it sort of a life. Because if you're just winging it, that tells me that you don't have much purpose, or you don't feel like you have much purpose. So purpose-driven people tend to get up early. We tend to have a schedule. We have a lot to accomplish. We're meeting with people. There are people expecting us to join them for breakfast, or maybe join them for exercise. Maybe you're going to go on a walk, or you're going to have a golf game. You've got a tea time or something like that. You want your life to look like that. Another thing that I'm finding now is I'm finally being consistent having a quiet time. So if reading the scripture or spending time in meditating or something that has been important to you, but the kind of the grind of life has kind of taken that away from you, let's reclaim that again. Let's actually make sure that's part of our life. Another thing that I'm finding is that now that I'm responsible for planning our meals, fixing meals since my wife is still working, one of my responsibilities is to do the shopping and to plan the meals. So for dinner, I like to think about healthy things. Like one dinner this week we're going to have beef and broccoli with some rice. I've already got some steaks. Another night we're going to have steak and baked potatoes. Not necessarily the healthiest, but you know what? We'll have a salad. I mean, how good is that, right? I mean, it's like fantastic. But it is something that if you're intentional with your time and you go shopping for specific things, make sure you got vegetables and healthy foods that you make yourself versus going out to a restaurant where it's cooked with all sorts of stuff. You know, it's much healthier for us to do this. Another thing that I'm finding is, in terms of a schedule, is when my wife and I actually have a conversation about her expectations. What would she like to have me do? Because the problem is I've got all day long. She's at work, right? So it's kind of good for her to understand kind of how my day is unfolding, what my plans are, and then it helps kind of her expectations of what I can accomplish that really means something to her. And you know, it's almost Valentine's Day, right? And I'm learning that one of the things that I can do to show Karen that I love her is to think about what are the things she's noticed. In fact, I've done something today that I'm going to wait to see when she comes home if she notices that I cleaned up something that I know was bothering her, right? So it's kind of, these are the fun things to do as we think about our spouse or someone we're living with or something that we're caring for them, showing them love and concern, and we're planning for those sorts of things. Winged people, they tend not to have much of a consistent wake-up time, and so if you're finding that this is what you're doing, could I challenge you? Start thinking about a schedule, start thinking about a purpose, start thinking about getting engaged back in life, those sorts of, be intentional. Because otherwise, if you're going to wing it, you're going to get up a weird, and the times will vary. You won't, just further away time, and you're at much higher risk of depression. And this is something that's a real problem for people who have had a productive career. Now when they get retired and their life just kind of splats out like they're not doing a blessed thing, that's not a good situation. Your risk of developing depression really rises. So by staying active and involved and purpose-filled, you have a much better chance of staying engaged and not even struggling at all, not skipping a beat. Anyhow, that's what I want to be like. And here's our bonus tip. It's not just the money we spend, but it's the time we spend. And if we start thinking about our lives and how we're going to live and the choices we're going to make, we need to think about in the context of the money that we've saved. And there's a lot of resources for that, and planning for financial security and those sorts of things. Well, regardless, if you can find activities that you enjoy that don't cost a lot of money, that's going to be a win-win for everybody. Even if you're finding that you're kind of sad with what resources you have, or if you're pretty happy with where you're at when you retire. If you actually find things that you enjoy that don't cost a lot of money, you're miles ahead, right? So for me, I found bluegrass. Well, I didn't realize that one of the benefits is there are bluegrass jams all around the city. So I live in Portland, and it's pretty, but everywhere it exists. There are bluegrass jams that are meeting at various restaurants at various days of the week. So like on Wednesday, I would go to a jam at a Round Table Pizza, for instance. But there's places that have jams. Some are out in parks. Like I mentioned Elliot, hearing that at one of the parks in Southeast Portland. So all you have to do is find an activity like this, and guess what? It will fulfill, if you can find something like bluegrass, it satisfies a lot of different things, because there are friendships with people that you know and you'll meet on a weekly basis, and you kind of stay connected to them. It is stimulating for their brain. So remember, I talked about the curiosity and those sorts of things. You have to learn the lyrics of words. You need to learn to make chord structures and those sorts of things. And then there's activity, because you're strumming and you're moving your fingers. And often I'll stand during a jam, maybe behind a few people, or go to sing. And so there's an activity associated with that. And I guess another thing is, in the bluegrass community, you can actually learn more than one instrument. And that's something I didn't realize, but I've noticed. I have one friend, when I first started to know her, she played the banjo, but then she switched to playing the fiddle. So the last 5 or 6 years, she's brought her fiddle and played the fiddle. And so you want to find things like this that take time but don't cost a lot of money. Well, what can you do that you would find enjoyable but that costs next to nothing? Things like hiking, riding a bike, bird watching, photography, and what else? Let me know in the comments what you're currently doing or that you want to do when you retire. Starting even before your retirement date would be an excellent way to prepare for your new adventure. Remember, we want to be forward focused. So this would be a way that you can prepare, is actually engage in these things before. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're finding this helpful. So here's a link to Jerry and Linda's video that I mentioned. And say hi to Gizmo for me.